All right, everyone. Welcome to math lesson, 101, 505. I don't know. In college, sometimes I use 4 digits, 2360. No, this is math 7, math 7H. Welcome. Hope this video is finding you well. Hope you're enjoying whatever it is you're doing, where you're at. I'm recording this on a Friday, so happy Friday. If you're not watching it on Friday, I'm sorry. As I've said before, hopefully a Friday is coming your way soon. Today's video, we're going to be talking about interest, and not how interested are you in math, but money interest. Interest is just a way to grow money or to get more money, or in some economics way of thinking of it, how to have money match inflation. But interest and interest rates and determining interest, we're going to talk about interest. The reason we're doing it here and in this subject is because it has to do with percents. And it's a version of the proportion, the percent proportion. It's a variation of that proportion. Looks a little different, but it's not very hard at all. In honors level, I'll show you something hard. But the interest equation that we're going to be going over, it's just a matter of taking money and turning it into more money. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, and you'll have an opportunity to do an assignment. Here's what interest is. Here's what interest means. You have a pile of money. Think of a pile of money. How much money should I use here? All right, I'll use $1 million. $1 million of money. And what interest does is when you do something with that money, interest can get tacked on to the top of that money and makes it more money. And that's what interest is. Interest is an amount of money above and beyond the initial amount. Let's say you put $1 million in the bank in savings. If you put it in savings, after a course of a few months, that money interest will be added on to that $1 million. So by the end, you'll have, $1 million plus the interest. Let's say, $300 of interest is added on. So now you have more money than you did before, and you really didn't do anything other than you had the money sitting in the bank. The bank is willing to pay you money to put it in the bank. Another way of looking at interest, it's the same thing as savings, but they've got what's called CDs, certificates of deposits. It's just another way. There's an interest that is put on top of the CD. So as you think about it for your money and for good purposes, interest can be seen as a good thing because it's money on top of what's already there. Well, it can also be seen as a good way for somebody else. Let's say that somebody wants to buy a car, and their car costs $30,000, 30K. K means thousand, so 30,000 bucks. Well, they have to borrow that money, and the people says, "Well, you can borrow my money, but you have to pay me interest to do that. You have to pay me more money if you want to borrow my $30,000 to buy a car." So that initial $30,000 gets borrowed, and every month you pay back a certain amount. Let's say it's a $500 car payment. Well, some of that actually doesn't even go to the $30,000. Some of it, let's say 20 bucks of it, goes to interest. So by the end, you've paid off all the $30,000. If you're the one borrowing the car, you've paid off the entire $30,000. Plus, you've also paid more on top of that to interest every month. And that's the whole reason why, borrowing money or lending money, that extra amount of money, that interest, is why borrowing money can either be seen as a good thing or a bad thing. In your life, you always want to do what you can to make money. You don't want to pay money as much as possible. Yeah, almost everyone gets a loan for a car. Everyone gets a loan for a house. But boy, do everything you can to not pay interest to a credit card company. Do everything you can to don't use a credit card when you're buying stuff unless you can pay it right off. Because their interest, the amount of interest that they put on something isn't like the small number or the small number. Let's say you go into debt, for something, maybe $5,000. You buy stuff, put that on a credit card. Their interest is like this. Their interest, they pull a lot of money. They make you pay. So when you pay them back, now let's say you pay them all $50 a month. When you pay them $50 a month, like $40 of that actually goes to interest. Doesn't even go to that money. So don't go into debt. Don't, as much as you can help it, don't do credit card debt. So this interest can either be a good thing or a bad thing. You know, there's some people that say, oh, smart people make interest. And people that aren't very smart, they pay interest on other things. But you'll be paying interest in your life at some point. Again, either on a house or on a car or maybe on an education. If you go to college and you borrow money for college, you'll be paying interest on that. You know, there's places where you will be paying. You have to use other people's money in this society sometimes to accomplish things. But just do it as little as possible. Do what you can to make interest. Well, that's the idea of interest. Let me teach you the actual mathematic work of figuring out where the interest is. The interest is simply the P times the R times the T. I call it IPERT. It's just the IPERT equation. And I'll explain what it is. I'll show you what I mean. But I just want to write the equation out, and then you can see how I explain it. And you can go onto the internet if you want to look at this is called the simple interest equation. Not because it's so easy, just because it's this kind of interest. There's another kind of interest we can talk about. We're just talking about IPERT, just a simple interest equation. And here's what it is. It means that the interest, that amount of money on top of the other money, is simply the principal times the rate times the time. And again, like I said, I'll explain this. The principal is just that first amount of money. It's a certain dollar amount. On that other page, I used $1 million or $30,000 or $5,000. It's the amount of money that we start with, the main amount of money that we're talking about. This is the whole of that equation. If we were doing the proportion equation, this would be the whole. But I'm not moving the variables around. I'm not turning it into the part over the whole equals the percent over the 100. We're not using that for this. It'll confuse you more than just saying IPERT. It's a new equation. Just memorize this new equation. This is the whole amount. The rate, that's the percent. And right now, if you want to buy a home, the interest rates are something like 2.5%. They're about 3%. And that 3%, that's the same thing as 0.03. Those two things mean the same thing. The 2.5 is 0.025, and you can see that by just typing this into your calculator, and you'll get the decimal. Or the time, the time is in years. That's the ugliest S I've ever seen. So you just multiply the principal times the rate times the time, and you know what the interest is. How much interest are you going to pay? And let me show you a couple examples. Let's say you ask your parents how much your house is worth, or you want to go buy a home, or your parents are willing to tell you what they paid for their house. Parents, if you're watching this, if this is too much information, sorry, just tell them, nah, you'll know when you're an adult. But if you look online and see how much your house is worth in your area, let's say that a house, that's the principal, let's say a house costs, we'll do $400,000. Let's say a house costs that much money. And you want to borrow that money to buy a house because you don't have just that much money just lying around. Almost no one does have that much money. So that's the principal. And you want to borrow it at, let's say, at 3% interest. So the 3% is what you have to pay on top of the $400,000. And nowadays, the amount of time and it's called a mortgage. This kind of interest is called a mortgage on a home. So let's say you do it for 30 years, because that's what the 30-year, many mortgages nowadays are 30-year mortgages. To find the interest, you simply multiply the principal times the rate times the time. So you just multiply those three things together. The 400,000 times 3% times 30. You type that in the calculator, you got the answer. That's all the interest is. That's all it means to find the interest of an amount. So when I type that in, and you might see problems, you might see them, write it out like this. Times 0.03 times 30. Don't be confused about the percent being written one way or another. When I type that in, 400,000 times 3% times 30 years, the amount of interest I would pay on that home is $360,000. And like I showed you on that page before, this is money on top of the 400,000. This is in addition. So when you've paid off your home, you haven't paid 400,000 on your home. You've paid 400,000 plus the interest, the extra money. You've paid, you're approaching $1 million on that. And that's why banks are so willing to loan you money. They're so willing to pay you a small amount on your savings account, but then turn around and loan it to somebody else for a big amount. And that's how banks get rich. But the point is, this interest is on top of the principal money, the whole, the complete, everything, all of it, the whole shebang, those words that we've looked up and found. So on these problems, you find the interest, and if they want to know, okay, how much is it all together? Well, it's the principal amount with the interest added on. So here's an example. What if you borrowed $680 at 11% for 2 years? Well, the interest is going to be PRT. I is the P times the R times the T. It's the IPRT. So it's the 680 times 11% times the number of years. So when I type that in the calculator, and just so you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to type 11% that way. It's the exact same thing times 2. You can type it in as a fraction to see. $149.60. $149.60. That is the interest on top of $680. If anyone ever wants to borrow money from you, say, sure, but let me talk about interest. You have to pay me back more than that. This person, when you add those on, the ending balance means you have to add the 680 to the 149.60. So you add that 149.60 plus the 680, 829.60. 829.60, I have to write a little smaller. There you go. There's your interest, not your interest, your interest and your principal amount. That's the ending balance. So on each one of these, to find the interest, you just take the principal times the rate times the time. IPRT. If you can memorize IPRT, you'll be completely ready for the test. No, I'm not hiccuping. IPRT. It's the equation for simple interest. For simple interest. Thanks for watching. Honors level. Let me just show you something real quick. And honors level, you'll be able to watch this, but you don't feel like you have to watch this if you don't. What you'll do sometimes is you've got the equation, I equals PRT. They might give you all of the numbers except for one of these ones. They might say, oh, the interest was $1,200. So the difference is you just put these numbers into the equation. So let's see, the 1,200 goes here. The principal, the 13,700 times the rate times the time is 4 years. And then when you plug that in, you try to solve for the rate. You try to figure out what the rate is. So we just solve like we've solved equations before. 1,200 is, I have no idea what that is. 13,700 times 4, 54,800 R, because that R is still there. And then you guys already know this. To get R by itself, you divide off the 54,000. So it's 1,200 divided by 5,480, or 54,800. So there's the percent rate. So if I move the decimal over, it's 2.18. 2.18%. So it's a 0.02 interest rate, or as you see them write it, the 2 over 100. So honors level work would be that I gave you the interest and the time, but not the principal. I gave you some of these variables and you had to figure out the other variables. That's an honors level understanding. You'll be doing more with that in 8th grade. All right, thanks for watching. The time is yours. Enjoy. Hope you've enjoyed these last 15 minutes and 22 seconds. Bye-bye.